It's a question I bet we've all asked ourselves at some point, right? Is it enough to just want something, to want it really, really badly, to have this grand vision for your future? Well, let's explore that through a story. So, our story kicks off with a young man who, on the surface, had it all. He was strong, he was healthy, everything except, well, motivation. The fable calls it mental laziness. He dreamed of a mountain of gold, but wasn't willing to lift a single shovel to even start looking for it. And this is where it gets really interesting. Think about that contrast. His body was perfectly capable, but his mind? Totally idle. So instead of building a life for himself, he just spent his days daydreaming, literally depending on the kindness of others to get by. And make no mistake, this guy had plenty of aspirations. He had these huge hopes and ambitions for himself. But here's the catch. They all stayed locked up in his mind, with absolutely no action to bring them out into the real world. Then, one day, a small thing happens that changes everything. Someone gives him a simple pot of milk. He takes it home, has a little, and just puts the rest of it right beside his bed. This little, everyday object is about to kickstart an absolutely wild fantasy. So he's lying there with this pot of milk next to him, and his mind just starts to race. He's not seeing a drink anymore, he's seeing the very first step on a ladder to incredible wealth. And his imagination is about to go into overdrive. And wow, does his dream just snowball from there? His thoughts start spiraling faster and faster. Okay, I'll turn this milk into cheese and sell it. With that money, I'll buy a chicken, and that chicken will have hundreds of chicks. I'll sell those to buy a whole bunch of cows and build a dairy empire. I'll get so rich, I'll be trading jewels with kings. And then I'll get married and have a son. And this is the wild part. His fantasy becomes so vivid, so real to him, that he actually prepares to act inside of it. At the very peak of this whole daydream, he thinks, if my future son turns out to be lazy, just like me, I'll teach him a lesson with a stick. So he is completely lost in this super detailed future that he's built up in his head. But what happens when a fantasy that feels so real smacks right into cold, hard reality? In that very moment, totally lost in the fantasy of disciplining his imaginary son, he swings his arm out wildly and connects directly with the real pot of milk sitting right at his bedside. And boom, just like that, it's all over. The pot shatters, the milk spills all over the floor, and in a split second, his entire imagined fortune, the cheese, the chickens, the cows, the jewels, it all just evaporates, leaving him exactly where he started. As the reality of his situation just crashes down on him, he feels completely and utterly miserable. Wretchedly unhappy, realizing that every single one of his imagined opportunities was just lost in a puddle on the floor. Okay, so this story illustrates such a crucial point. It's not really about spilled milk, is it? It's a powerful metaphor for the danger of living entirely inside your own head. And that brings us to the absolute heart of this whole fable. Your actions have to match your ambitions. It's just not enough to have a brilliant dream. Without the hard work to back it up, a dream has no weight. It's fragile, and it can be shattered by the first little bump with reality. So let's really spell it out. What's the real difference between fantasy and reality here? Well, fantasy is just hope, without any action. It's our guy daydreaming under the tree. Reality, on the other hand, is hope that's actually powered by work. Okay, so if dreaming isn't enough, then what is? What does it actually take to turn those big aspirations into real, tangible achievements? Well, the fable actually points us toward a kind of toolkit for success. The story highlights 3 absolutely essential keys. First up, you've got hard work. That's the raw engine that turns an idea into something real. Then you have discipline, which is so important. That's what keeps you going long after the initial excitement wears off. And finally, there's persistence. That's the grit you need to push through all the setbacks, the spilled milk that will definitely get in your way. And I really want to zero in on this idea of being persistent. It means you keep going, firmly, even when you run into trouble or opposition. Unlike our protagonist, who gave up his entire dream at the first literal stumble, persistence is all about getting back up after you've spilled the milk. So in the end, the fable leaves us with this powerful call to action. Don't just sit around and wait for miracles to happen to you. The real magic, the real miracles, happen when you decide to make them happen with your own work. So the final question isn't just, what do you dream of? It's, what are you willing to build?
Now. So, let's just start with the biggest question right out of the gate. You hear this term, passive income, thrown around everywhere. But what does it really mean? It sounds simple, but getting this right is the very first step to totally changing how you think about money.
And here it is in a nutshell. Passive income is the money you earn after you've already done the hard work up front. Think about it like planting a tree. You do all that tough work at the beginning, digging the hole, planting the seed, watering it, but eventually that tree grows and gives you fruit year after year with just a little bit of maintenance. That's the idea.
So here's our game plan. We've just figured out what passive income is. Next, we're going to talk about building a rock-solid financial foundation. Then, we'll get into turning your ideas into actual action. And finally, we'll cover how you grow and protect that income for the long run.
All right, let's dive into our first section, building your financial foundation. And I can't stress this enough. These first two steps are absolutely crucial. Without this solid groundwork, anything you try to build on top of it is just going to crumble.
It really all starts with these two things. First, you've got to save up some initial capital. It doesn't have to be a lot, but you need a starting point. Every single success story starts with that first dollar saved. And second, you have to get a handle on your spending. It's a simple truth, right? You can't build wealth if more money is going out than coming in.
Now, this right here is a golden tip. It can be so tempting to borrow money to go big right away, but that just adds a ton of pressure and risk. When you start with your own saved money, you're betting on yourself, and you don't owe anybody anything. It's just a much, much safer way to get started.
And this slide just lays out the required mindset shift perfectly. Over on the left, you've got luxuries. Expensive phones, fancy cars, things that lose value the second you buy them. But on the right, you have assets. These are investments, projects, things that are actually designed to grow in value and make you more money. The choice you make between these two columns, well, that's going to shape your entire financial future.
So, let's make it super simple. An asset is anything you own that puts money in your pocket. A luxury is anything that takes money out of your pocket. The whole goal of this entire journey is just to collect as many assets as you possibly can. Okay, let's move on. Once you've got that solid financial base, it's time to move from just thinking about it to actually doing it. This is the fun part, where we turn all that saving and discipline into a real project that can generate income.
So where do you find these opportunities? You might be surprised. A lot of times they're hiding in plain sight. It could be a simple service you can offer online, something local like raising livestock, or even just renting out tools you already own. The key isn't finding the one perfect idea. It's about finding the idea that's the best fit for you.
And this is one of the biggest roadblocks for so many people. They get stuck in the trap of waiting for the perfect plan, but that just leads to, well, never starting. The truth is, you learn the most important lessons by actually doing. When you start small, right now, you minimize the risk and you start building that momentum you need to keep going.
Now for our last section, grow, diversify, and persevere. So, you started your first project, and hey, it's making a little bit of money. Awesome. This is where we learn how to turn that little trickle of success into real long-term wealth.
Here it is, maybe the most powerful secret to building wealth. Your first profits are not for spending. Not yet. Think of them like seeds for a much, much bigger forest. The real magic happens when you scale up, when you reinvest every dollar you earn to make your project grow bigger and stronger. Let's make this really concrete. Imagine your project makes its first $50 in profit. That is a huge milestone. And the natural urge is to say, great, let's go spend it. But instead, you make a different choice. You take that whole $50 and you put it right back into the project. Maybe you buy more inventory, run a bigger ad, whatever it is. Because your project is now more powerful, your next profit isn't $50, it's $75. And then you do it again. That $75 goes straight back in. And now, all of a sudden, your project is generating $120. Do you see what's happening here? Your money is finally starting to work for you. This is the power of compounding, and it's how that tiny little seed you planted can grow into a full-blown money tree.
But hang on. What happens if that one project, that one money tree, runs into trouble? To protect yourself, you just can't put all your eggs in one basket. Relying on a single source of income is just too risky.
And this chart shows the solution perfectly. Once your first project is stable and making money, you use some of those profits to start a second one, and then maybe a third. You're spreading out the risk. So if one project has a slow month, the others can pick up the slack and keep you moving forward. Now, this strategy has a name, and it's called diversification. It's just a simple idea, spreading your money across different projects so you can lower your overall risk. It's one of the most fundamental principles of smart investing.
Okay, so when do you finally get to enjoy some of this money? Well, here's a really smart rule of thumb. Once your projects are stable, you can start to reward yourself with up to 50% of the profits, not the initial money. The other 50% at least should always go back into growing your assets.
This brings us to our final and maybe most important step. Why is it that so many people who start this journey end up failing? Well, it usually comes down to two things. They're impatient and they stop learning. They want results overnight, and when things get tough, they stop adapting.
The only way to fight this is through adaptation. You know, markets change, customers change, technology changes. Your ability to keep learning and tweak your plan to fit these new realities is what's ultimately going to make or break your success.
So there you have it. The 7 steps, from planting that one tiny seed to hopefully growing a whole forest of assets. The path is clear, the tools are right here, and the journey has officially begun. So the only real question left is, are you patient enough to see it through?